Welcome to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey Dunn, educator, priestess, and professional somatic therapist. In April 2025, I went through a priestess initiation of old and launched the Priestess Initiations podcast 6 months later. Whatever brought you here today, I invite you to drop into the spiral with me. Let's begin. Welcome back to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey, and today we're talking about Rhiannon. She is a Celtic goddess, and she's associated with horses. So we'll also be talking a bit about the year of the fire horse today. And when I think of Rhiannon, I'm remembering back to a trip when I was a kid in Ireland. And I don't know where I saw it because I was pretty little, but there was an image of her on a white horse, a goddess on a white horse, her hair just flowing in the wind, and this rainbow overhead. Like just after the rain, you could kind of see the storm clouds just behind her in the distance. And I was in Ireland around when I was 8. For the first time that I remember being there. And so it could have been that trip. But Rhiannon is, she's a special Celtic goddess for a lot of reasons. But she holds a little place in my heart, and that image stuck with me, I think, because at that age I was big into horses. I rode horses as a child. And even though it's been years since I've been on a horse, that body memory stays with you. The smell of horses, the feeling of the warmth under your palm when you just put it against their shoulder. You can feel that years later. And so that's in this image of the rainbow after the storm, the white horse, and this woman, this goddess, who cannot be caught. That image is the transmission of this episode, which is why I'm starting with it. And a brief orientation to season 2. So season 2 officially started a few episodes ago, and in that process, I was still settling with where I'm going with this season. But I've really decided that season 2 is going to be the Celtic Earth and ancestral reclamation arc. And so Rhiannon is where we're beginning with that. And you don't need Celtic ancestry to receive anything this season. We'll still touch on other goddesses that are not Celtic throughout this season. But I'm personally feeling called to honor my own lineage right now in this moment in time. And we'll talk more about that next week and ancestral reclamation a little deeper. And there's something about spring and all this fire energy that is just making me crave rain and water and earth. And from that, I'm going to move us into astrology a little bit. And this episode, I'm also practicing allowing a looser format to exist. So you can tell me how that feels. But the astrology of the week, we're still going to do that. The astrology of this week, as always, is all posted on Patreon. And a few notables I want to point out is that Mars enters Aries on Thursday. When a planet enters a sign, it's called an ingress. So Mars ingresses Aries on Thursday. And that's the warrior coming home after months of dissolving in Pisces. And so think bold, initiatory warrior fire, self-directed desire, action. There might be a feeling of restlessness this week, of impulsivity. That's kind of the shadow of Mars and of Aries. And so it's coming back into its home sign too. Mars is very at home in Aries. And there's pros and cons to that. That means that the energy is more intense. The light and the shadow of it's more intense. So the sovereign self is going to stop waiting for permission. And this is not the week to make impulsive decisions. This is the week to act from your own inner center, your own inner center. That Venus energy. We did an Aphrodite episode for Venus and Taurus. Venus is in an earth sign. That's her home sign. So Mars is entering his home sign, and Venus is in her home sign this week, which is a really beautiful start to this fire and earth arc. And we're going to be talking about fire and earth all the way through Beltane because it's really happening right now. Where this month of April, there's a ton of stuff in fire and air signs. And we're slowly seeing more and more things enter Taurus. And Venus is leading that. And for me, that feels relieving because I am an earth and water element person myself. I actually have Mars in a fire sign, but the rest of my chart is very earth and water. So this energy is intense. And if you're feeling that, that's normal. And if you're a fire sign and you're like, this is awesome, like, let's go, also probably normal. But another thing I want to point out this week that feels really important is Chiron. And so Chiron is the wounded healer archetype. He also has his own little asteroid or planetary body. And he is going to be conjunct Eris, and I've mentioned Eris before, in Aries. Eris is the truth teller. She's actually the sister of Aries, the god of war Aries. And so Chiron, the wounded healer, and Eris, the truth teller, are sitting together in the sign of identity and self-assertion right now. So the wound of false accusation might be coming up. Being blamed for disruption you didn't create, only revealed. That's Eris's wound. So Chiron's revealing the wounds of Eris. There might be noticing ways that you're still carrying shame that was never yours. And this is Rhiannon's exact wound, written in the sky this week. So it's not a coincidence that we're meeting her now. So this week, the sky is asking you to reclaim your story, to stop carrying what was placed on you, and to ride at your own pace, to really find your seat in the saddle. And so we can't talk about Rhiannon without talking about horses. We can't talk about fire energy without talking about the fire element. And all of that is to say, this is the year of the fire horse. And it began on February 17th this year, and it will last until February 5th next year. So the Chinese year of the zodiac is a little different than ours. But the year of the fire horse occurs about every 60 years. And people who were born in the year of the fire horse, especially women, fire horse women, were historically feared, considered too wild, too independent, too powerful. And in some cultures, their births were even dreaded. And if not avoided, it was sometimes avoided trying to have children in year of the fire horse, especially female children, because this is the patriarchal pattern. Feminine power that cannot be controlled gets labeled dangerous, right? And so Rhiannon, I usually associate Rhiannon with earth element, and she still is associated with earth element. And in this episode, I'm going to also be talking about a little bit of her fire, because there's ways in which she really is embodying an eternal fire horse, sovereign, untamable, and still here. And yet she's balanced, right? Because she is one with the horse. And horses themselves are an earth animal, right? They're an earth-based animal. I know all animals are earth-based, but you know what I mean. Like there are animals that we associate with different elements. Horses are typically associated with earth energy. And so this fire and earth, we're seeking balance in that throughout this whole month. How do you ground while the fire is burning? How do you direct the fire? How do you use earth to direct the fire toward your highest purpose? that's the whole month of April in a nutshell. So, if you've ever been told you're too much, too intense, too independent, you might carry fire horse energy. And the fire horse doesn't ask permission to move toward its purpose. And neither did Rhiannon. And so here's Rhiannon's story. And Rhiannon's story comes to us through something called the Mabinogion. A collection of ancient Welsh tales written down in the medieval period, but rooted in an oral tradition far older. And this is where a lot of Celtic mythology comes from, is from the Mabinogion. And Rhiannon lives in the first branch of the text, so the text is divided into branches. And her story begins on a mound. So in Welsh mythology, Pohys, which I might be mispronouncing, but I'm trying my best, it's spelled very differently than it sounds, was the prince of Dyfed, and he is sitting on a sacred hill called Gorsedd Aberth, a liminal place, a threshold between worlds, where it was said that whoever sat there would either witness a wonder or receive wounds. And then he sees her, a woman on a white horse, moving along the road below at an unhurried pace. Unhurried, that detail matters. She's not racing, she's not fleeing. She moves with complete self-possession at exactly the pace she has chosen. This is really important for us right now in Year of the Fire Horse. So Pohi sends his fastest riders to catch her. They cannot. She maintains her pace, never appearing to hurry, and yet they cannot close the distance. The next day, he sends faster horses. Still, they cannot catch her. So on the third day, Pohi rides himself and calls out to her to stop. Not commands, he doesn't command her to stop, but he requests. He calls to her, and she stops. She turns to him and says, "I would have been better pleased if you had asked me sooner." She already knew. She was aware of the pursuit. She chose the pace, and she chose the moment. She stopped when she decided to stop, not when he caught her. And so this is the first teaching of Rhiannon. She cannot be caught. She can only be met. Her name comes from the earlier Celtic Rigatonia, which means great queen. And she arrives from the other world, Anon, bearing gifts of abundance and the magic of birds, whose song can wake the dead and lull the living to sleep. So she's also sometimes associated with dreams and the other world. And the other world in a lot of Celtic mythology is called Anon. And so she's not a mortal woman. This is important. She is sovereignty itself, clothed in flesh, riding into the world on a white horse. And she chooses Pohi. This is important. She comes to him. She's observed him, assessed him, decided he is worthy. And she tells him she would rather marry him than any other man. But it's her choice to make. She arrives with her own agency intact. So they get married. And this is where the myth turns dark. And a lot of these old Celtic myths have a dark side, a shadow side, right? So Rhiannon gives birth to a son. And on the night of the birth, there were 6 women appointed to guard her and the infant, and they fall asleep. And when they wake, the child is gone. And so terrified of punishment, they make a decision that will define the rest of the story. These women supposedly kill a puppy, which is already sad. And then they smear the blood on Rhiannon's face and hands while she sleeps. And they tell Pohi that Rhiannon killed and ate her own child. So Rhiannon wakes to find herself accused. She has no memory of what happened because she was asleep. She has no witness. Her son is missing, so she's afraid. And she has only her word. and her word against the testimony of 6 women and the evidence of blood on her hands is not enough for all the nobles. But Plohi loves her, and he does not execute her. But he doesn't fully defend her either. He finds a middle ground. He accepts the counsel of his court and decrees a punishment. And the punishment is that Rhiannon must sit at the gate of the castle for 7 years. She must offer to carry visitors on her back like a horse into the court. And she must tell every person she meets the story of her crime, the crime she did not commit. And so this is dark. I'm aware this is dark. And we're getting to the meaning making here. So part of this myth is that she is made to perform her own guilt, made to carry the story that they wrote about her in her own body, made to be the one who serves, the one who carries for a sin that was never hers, right? And this is a theme. This is a theme with women and wounded women. And if you think back to the Mary Magdalene episode, whether you've listened to that or not, there's a parallel here in this wound. And Rhiannon, she does it. She endures. She sits at the gate. She tells the story when required, but she does not become it. Somewhere inside her, the great queen remains intact, waiting unhurried at her own pace. And the myth does not show you Rhiannon collapsing, breaking, becoming the story they told about her. Because she doesn't. She holds on to her sovereignty, and she accepts her punishment, unhurried at her own pace, for this crime she did not commit. And there are many people that have different reasons for why would she do this at all. My belief is because she wanted to encounter the travelers. She wanted to feel everyone who came by. And she was in hope that her son, who was taken, would one day return. And if he returned and she was at the castle gates, she would be the first to see him. And the child, Prudery, had not been killed. He had been taken to another realm and raised by a lord named Chiron. I might be mispronouncing that one, who eventually recognizes the boy's noble bearing and returns him to his parents. So the truth comes out. Rhiannon's vindicated, and the women who lied are punished. But the myth doesn't end on the vindication. The myth ends on the name. So Rhiannon names her son Prudery, meaning worry or care. Because she said, and this is from the book, the Norse book, the Mabinogion, she said, "If it is true, my anxiety about him will be with me always." And so what that means in translation for me is that she's naming him after the feeling she carried during those years of false accusation. That feeling of worry and care. She's not erasing what happened. She doesn't pretend the wound wasn't real of a mother separated from her child, of carrying this burden that wasn't hers to carry. She names it and she carries it forward transformed. So this is the final teaching of Rhiannon. She cannot be caught, she cannot be broken, and she does not pretend that the wound wasn't real. She rides on at her own pace, unhurried and intact. So the great queen endures, right? And those are her 3 big things. She cannot be caught. She rides at her own pace. She cannot be broken. And she doesn't pretend that the wound wasn't real. And then there's another thing I want to mention here, because Rhiannon is the Welsh incarnation of a much older pan-Celtic horse goddess, Aponia, who is a Gaulish horse goddess, worshipped across Gaul, Ireland, Britain, and into Rome. And so Epona is the only Celtic goddess to receive official Roman cult worship. That's how powerful she is. And they're the same archetype is what I'm getting at here. So when we talk about archetypes, we're talking about a concept, an idea that it lives in the collective unconscious, an embodied idea in a way. And so Rhiannon and Epona are the same idea in the collective unconscious. They have different names. They're not exactly the same goddess, but there's a lot of parallels between them. Both are depicted with horses, birds, abundance. Both are goddesses of sovereignty. If I had to name the differences, Epona for me is a little more spring, and Rhiannon's a little more associated with winter. So they're actually the perfect pairing for this threshold that we're in right now. And the horse in Celtic tradition, archetypally, is the sovereign animal. The land used to choose the king through ritual marriage to the horse goddess. So sovereignty was a feminine principle. The king did not simply take power, he received it from her. Just like Rhiannon chose Pohi. So what was lost when the horse goddess was diminished was the understanding that sovereignty flows from the feminine, from the land, from relationship, not from conquest. Rhiannon is that lineage alive and present, and she's asking to be remembered right now. For us to remember that sovereignty flows from the feminine, the land, and relationship, which you could call Venus energy, Venus and Taurus, not from conquest, which would be the epitome of Mars in Aries. And so right now, this week, it feels really important to bring Rhiannon in as the archetype of feminine sovereignty, this inner knowing that cannot be domesticated. And she's not claiming that she doesn't feel worry, right? I think often we feel this push-pull, or I should say I feel this push-pull in myself, especially this week. This energy's been intense between this sovereign inner knowing, this grounded intuition, grounded, deep, divine feminine intuition, and this sense of everything's moving fast, feelings in my body, in my chest, getting pulled forward into the worry, right? Rhiannon's not denying the worry. She's naming that's there. And so is the sovereignty. So is the inner knowing. So is her inner knowing that her son was alive somewhere and she would wait for him. And so the individuation journey in, kind of Jungian archetypal terms is that Rhiannon's story is a map of what happens when we know who we are and the world tries to rewrite it. The archetypal wound that she carries is that of the falsely accused, bearing the story of a crime she did not commit, which is the same wound as Mary Magdalene, the falsely accused, right? And both were eventually cleared of their false accusations. And yet that's not the piece that history likes to remember. So when we're thinking about Rhiannon, I want you to think about the phenomenology of sovereignty. What does it actually feel like in the body, in your body, to be sovereign? Not performing confidence, not performing calm, not pretending you don't worry, but acknowledging the worry and choosing to inhabit your own ground. And so there's a somatic experience here too of false accusation, how the body contracts around shame that was placed on it, how we begin to perform innocence, how we contort ourselves to be believed, right? And that those two are opposing forces, the somatic experience of sovereignty and the somatic experience of false accusation. One contracts the body, meaning like it contracts in, like think you're like curving in, picture your chest caving in, like. And then the other, this experience of sovereignty, expands the body. So it's this expansion and contraction energy happening. And that's very much what's happening in our astrology right now. And somatic boundaries and relational boundaries are a huge piece of this. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this inner-outer contraction, right? How do you deal with this crazy astrology? What can we take from Rhiannon's myth that we can actually make actionable? And that is sovereign boundaries. Somatic sovereign boundaries in your body, embodied boundaries. And so a somatic boundary is not a wall or a defense. It's not a brick wall that you build around yourself. It's embodied. It's a membrane. It knows what's yours and what's not. It can feel the difference between your shame and someone else's projection. And Rhiannon had this because Rhiannon never lost herself, even while enduring her punishment. She did not collapse. She did not perform contrition. She endured with full self-possession. That is not martyrdom. That is somatic sovereignty. And so we're going to do an exercise today to help you find some somatic boundaries in your own body, to get a sense of this membrane, to start to feel into the difference between what's yours and what's not. And before we move there, I just want to mention the horse archetype as well. I want to bring us back to the horse. Because the horse in Jungian terms is vitality, instinct, and it's the power of the unconscious. So Rhiannon rides the horse. She's not the passive feminine. She's the one in motion, the one who cannot be caught unless she chooses to be, and she goes at her own pace. And this is really important this week and next week and really the whole month. As you're working with horse energy, as you're working with boundaries, as you're working on where is my seat, where is my sovereignty, allow yourself to also connect to the horse, right? A lot of cultures say the best horseback riders, like Rhiannon, the horse and the rider become one. And horses are earth, and the horse is moving fast right now. And you can connect to earth through yourself, through your center, through Venus, through your soma and body, and through the archetype of the horse. Horses spend most of their days sitting still, eating grass. They do not spend most of their days running, but when they run, they go fast. When they have a direction, they know where they're going. And so as you work through, how do I deal with all the chaos in the world right now? And there's a lot of chaos. How do I deal with the chaos in my own life? How do I ride the waves of change, transition? How do I deal with projections that might be being put upon me by others? We come back to sovereign boundaries, and we come back to stillness, allowing the horse to carry you and allowing yourself to be sovereign on the horse. Communicating with the horse intuitively the direction you want to go. And so I want to invite you in all this momentum, in all this crazy energy, to find a moment of stillness. Right now, find stillness. Seated, feet on the floor if you can, or the earth, even better. And really feel both feet on the ground. And take a moment to take a deep breath. Let something go with your next breath. And keep breathing. And with each in-breath, ask yourself, what am I carrying right now that was never mine? Letting it go with the out-breath. Maybe it's a story someone told about me. Maybe it's a shame I absorbed. A false accusation I've been quietly trying to disprove. Maybe unconsciously trying to disprove. Feel where that lives in the body. Don't try to fix it. Just locate it. And when you're ready, really breathe into the body. Breathe into that place and ask, is this mine? It's likely not yours. It's likely a projection. And allow yourself to breathe out. To let what's not yours go. To let one thing that is not yours that you've been carrying go in this moment. When you're ready, just bring some gentle awareness to the surface of your skin. And skin's really interesting. Skin is actually your largest organ. And it's your first boundary. It's the place where you end and the world begins. So I invite you to really visualize your skin. Visualize it beginning to shimmer. Iridescent. Like a rainbow. Like light on water just after rain. Really letting yourself feel your skin, visualize it, and visualize this rainbow, iridescent shimmering just on the edge of your skin. Letting it coat your whole body in the shimmering rainbow. That shimmering is discernment. It knows what belongs inside and what does not, what nourishes and what diminishes, what's yours and what was placed on you. So just let the rainbow light move across the whole surface of the body, the shoulders, where you're carrying what isn't yours, over your chest and throat, where there might be things you're holding that you haven't gotten to express. Let that rainbow light move over your belly, where maybe you absorb what the room's feeling unconsciously. Anywhere you feel something that isn't yours, breathe in the rainbow light. Let the shimmer clarify it. Let the shimmer identify that this little piece you're carrying is not yours. Not yours. Not yours. This practice you can do anytime, and it's an invitation to start trusting yourselves, to practice discernment. What is my truth? What is not my truth? And that's how we get through this month. So I want to close with the image. I want to close with the image of the white horse, of the rainbow overhead, of the goddess who rides at her own pace and does not slow down to explain herself. Your skin is your sovereignty. your body knows where you end, what's yours and not yours. How we move through this, all this fire energy, is through trusting that, through trusting the body, through trusting spirit, and holding in alignment. All right. Let me know what you thought in the comments of this slightly different formatted style. And also, any thoughts or feelings on this Celtic arc that we're going to be diving into the next few weeks. Next week, I'll be talking a little bit more about my own Celtic ancestry and also ancestral reclamation work, what it is to do that, how that's really aligning with the astrology of next week. And then we will, of course, have Beltane soon after that, before you know it. And so really allowing yourself right now to use the earth inside yourself, that Venus energy, that Venus in Taurus, the grounded, intuitive, embodied feminine, to help you direct and discern where to use all this fire energy, right? To make decisions from a grounded place, not an impulsive one, no matter how much Mars is tempting you to. If you're able to do this, I really believe the rewards will come in the next few weeks. And if not, it's okay. Do this rainbow light practice. It's normal that we take in things that aren't ours. It's normal right now that we're absorbing some of what's happening in the collective. And so using this rainbow skin practice, and you can call it rainbow skin, that's kind of fun. But Rhiannon rainbow skin maybe, to practice sovereign boundaries, to allow yourself and give yourself permission every day to just take a moment to let go of something you absorbed that's not yours. Because there's a lot we're taking in right now. And it's okay to keep practicing letting it go. All right. I will see you next week. Like, subscribe, share. If you haven't rated this podcast, ratings are a big deal. They really boost your visibility, especially on Apple Podcasts. So if you're on Apple Podcasts and you love the show and you haven't dropped a rating and you feel called to, so much appreciated. Trust yourself. Trust the spiral. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Trust the spiral. This podcast offers spiritual and psychological education and priestess wisdom. This is not therapy, counseling, or mental health treatment. If you need mental health support, please contact a licensed provider, and in a mental health emergency in the U.S., call 988.